All right, let's talk about that gut feeling. We're going to dive deep into gastrointestinal inflammation today. It's a really complex world, but we're going to demystify it. Break down what it is, how it works, and what happens when your body's internal alarm system gets stuck in the on position. So, let's get into it. Here's the game plan. We'll kick things off with the basics of what inflammation actually is. Then, we'll look at those sudden, acute attacks. After that, we're shifting gears to the chronic side of things, IBD. We'll compare its two major forms and then wrap up with how people manage these really tough, lifelong conditions. So, first things first, what are we even talking about when we say gut inflammation? The best way to think about it is as your body's own internal alarm system, its first line of defense. I mean, it's a word we hear thrown around constantly, right? Oh, this food causes inflammation, or I have some inflammation. But what is actually happening in there? It's a pretty amazing biological process, really. Okay, so here's the core of it. When your body senses trouble, could be an injury, could be some nasty bacteria, it hits the panic button. It sends a rush of blood and an army of immune cells to the scene. It's all about protection, to fight off the invaders and start patching things up. Now, this is absolutely key. Inflammation isn't just one thing. It is two totally different personalities. You've got acute inflammation. That's the fire alarm. It's loud, it's sudden, it gets your attention, and then once the danger's gone, it shuts off. But then, you've got chronic inflammation. And that's way more like a slow burn, something that just smolders away day after day. And that's where things get a lot more complicated. Let's dig into that fire alarm scenario first. These are the moments when your gut sounds a full-on red alert. These are sudden, they are severe, and they demand your attention like right now. Appendicitis is the classic and, frankly, pretty terrifying example. It all starts with a simple blockage, but that blockage causes this massive pressure buildup, which chokes off blood flow. That's where the pain comes from, and it happens fast. The pain famously moves to this one specific spot called the McBurney point, and once that happens, the clock is seriously ticking. We're talking 24 to 48 hours before the appendix could actually burst. And if it does burst, well, that can lead to something called peritonitis. This is a whole other level of serious. We're not talking about one inflamed organ anymore. We're talking about an infection spreading through the entire lining of your abdomen. This is a 5-alarm medical emergency. And this is exactly why recognizing the signs is so important. The number one classic sign, the one that screams peritonitis, is a rigid, board-like abdomen. The muscles are so clenched that the belly is literally hard as a board. You combine that with a high fever and a racing heart, that's tachycardia, and you have a true crisis on your hands. So just to wrap this part up, these acute conditions, they're sudden, they're intense, and they are not something you can wait out. They are emergencies that need immediate intervention. Okay, but remember that slow burn we talked about? What happens when the fire alarm is off, but the embers just keep glowing, day in and day out? This leads us to a completely different kind of fight. And that fight is with chronic inflammation, which we can really understand by looking at inflammatory bowel disease, or IBD. This isn't a sudden crisis that comes and goes. This is a lifelong battle. And to give you a sense of scale here, this isn't some rare thing. We are talking about 3 million people in the United States alone living with IBD. That's a huge number. This is a major health issue. So what is IBD exactly? Well, it's not one single illness. It's really an umbrella term. Underneath that umbrella, you'll find 2 main conditions that you've probably heard of: ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. They both involve that chronic, slow-burn inflammation, but you're about to see they are very, very different beasts. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty, because this is one of the most important distinctions in gut health. They both fall under IBD, but telling them apart is absolutely critical for how they're diagnosed and, more importantly, how they're managed. This table just lays it all out so perfectly. Let's start with location. Ulcerative colitis, or UC, is only in the colon, and it's a continuous inflammation. Crohn's? It can pop up anywhere, literally from your mouth to your anus, in these little patches called skip lesions. The symptoms they cause day to day are different too. With UC, you're often looking at a lot of liquid, bloody stools. Crohn's, not so much. And look at that last row, the need for surgery. It is so much more common in Crohn's patients. A huge difference. Let me give you a way to picture this. Imagine the wall of your intestine is like the wall of a house. Ulcerative colitis is like damage to just the wallpaper. It's only on that very inner lining. But Crohn's disease goes deeper. It's like the inflammation burns right through the wallpaper, through the drywall, and gets into the studs of the house. That's why it causes different problems, like fistulas. But here's the thing. For all their differences, there's one very serious risk they share. That constant, smoldering inflammation, year after year, takes a toll. And after about 10 years of living with either disease, the risk for developing colorectal cancer goes up significantly. So if you can't just put out the fire for good, how do you live with it? How do you manage a disease that's always there? Well, the answer isn't just one thing. It's a whole holistic strategy for life. You really have to think of it like a toolkit with multiple tools for different jobs. Of course, you've got drug therapy, powerful medications to cool down the inflammation. Then there's nutrition and rest. Sometimes that means giving the bowel a complete break to heal. If that's not enough, there's surgery. And this one is so important, there's psychosocial support. You have to address the anxiety, the depression, and the shared disruption this disease causes in someone's life. And this quote, wow, this just gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? It perfectly captures the human side of IBD. The challenge isn't just the physical pain, it's this constant fear. This feeling of being tied to the toilet can absolutely dominate a person's life, their freedom, and their mental health. So in the end, managing IBD is a marathon, not a sprint. It has to be this ongoing, collaborative partnership between the person living with the disease and their whole healthcare team. The real goal isn't just to treat the symptoms, it's to protect and maintain a person's quality of life. And that really brings us full circle. We've talked about the difference between a fire alarm and a slow burn, the difference between ulcerative colitis and Crohn's. So the question I want to leave you with is this. How does having this deeper understanding empower people to take charge, to ask the right questions, and to become true partners and advocates in their own health journey? Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.